Welcome to the International Panel of the Pipeline Industries Guild webinar. The International Panel does a lot of work behind the scenes in identifying best practices internationally and the impact that can have on the wider industry. And we're always looking for new members. So if you're working in any area that's got international implications or best case that you'd like to share internationally, we would love for you to contact us and see what we can do together. In the meantime, I'd like you to meet Tim.Over from AtkinsRéalis. Tim, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your role, and take the chair.
Thanks, Kanthi. Yes, so I am Tim.Over. I work with AtkinsRéalis from our utility solutions practice. I'm also chair of the Pipeline Industries Guild Southeastern branch as well. So I say worked with the Pipeline Industries Guild for the last 5 years or so. My role at AtkinsRéalis is primarily based around buried utilities and making sure development sites can progress with a decent steer on what lies beneath. And this presentation today will be focused on practices that we've applied in the UK and are now exporting to international areas, noting similarities with different countries and territories across the world.
Thank you. So what are you going to be talking to us about today?
Well, I'm going to firstly share my screen, and I'm hoping that you can see my presentation here. We're going to be talking about utility solutions broadly. And what I mean by that is how we can solve problems posed by buried utilities. And that touches on things like digitisation, actually conceptual site awareness, and making sure it's easy for people to understand where utilities are and the next steps in terms of managing those utilities. Ultimately, utilities can make and break a project, and it's important that you have an understanding of that quite early in the project lifecycle.
Indeed.
So I appreciate we're recording this session. We're going to ask for questions at the end. Feel free to add your questions into the chat pane. I'm more than happy to take them at the end. I'll also provide my email address at the end of the session as well if people have some questions post call, or if you want to ask some questions outside of the broadcast, that is absolutely fine. So without further ado, I'll give you a bit of an introduction and some contents in terms of what we're actually going to be speaking about today. I'll give you a bit of an introduction on my team, and yes, Gary, I will share the slide deck. I will speak about our utility solutions practice within AtkinsRéalis and how that relates to AtkinsRéalis Ireland as well. And then the crux of this presentation is going to be on digitisation and the types of techniques that we have in place in the UK that we've now exported to Ireland, and how that relates to utilities in general. There will be some technical aspects that I will try and explain fully, and we'll talk about the so what of our findings and what that means for innovation, what that means for efficiency, and ultimately best practice across the board. So AtkinsRéalis are a civil engineering consultancy. A lot of people will have heard the Atkins name before. We had a brand update approximately 2 years ago, taking our Canadian base into our name. So the Réalis bit stems from Montreal, which is where our company is headquartered now. So Atkins has become AtkinsRéalis. We have a UK entity and an Irish entity. We have teams across the world and different trading arrangements to suit that. We have a utility solutions practice, which is based in the UK, providing services to the UK and Ireland, and to other parts of the world as well. Watch this space. And we've been involved in some significant infrastructure projects. We are really well set in this space in the UK and Ireland. We work on some really large projects with transportation clients, energy clients, housing developers, you name it. I've just dropped a couple of key partners on this slide here, where we provide some really quite extensive services. I'm going to go straight into actually the niche of the services and give you a bit of background information on what is required from a utility standpoint, how that differs in Ireland from the UK. Basically, there's a business as usual approach to managing utilities. So the overarching aim in the UK and Ireland is to manage utilities appropriate, making sure that each utility asset owner is approached, those plans and assets are received in plenty of time and rolled into the planning life cycle, basically to avoid harm, any project delays, and making sure that people can work safely. And in Ireland, it's very similar to the UK. Follow Health and Safety Guidance 47 in the UK, and similarly in Ireland, there's a Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. So similar guidance documents. Actually, they follow the same best practice specification as well, which is PAS 128, and elements of that are woven into the code of practice, which basically means you need to manage the utility asset owners, be aware of who you need to contact, and make sure you've got the adequate plans for your development site. It's common sense, but until it's written down, that's the process to follow. The difficulty comes because a lot of the information is paper-based, PDF-based, and not digital. So the problem in Ireland and the UK is that we've got a lot of utility assets that are old, mostly have been developed in the 60s and 70s, and have various different update states, should we say. We've got many asset owners that have invested heavily in technology to digitize their assets, but far and away the most common way of delivery of utility plans specifically is PDF. So that presents a problem, especially where you've got really urban areas like Dublin, London, Birmingham, Cork, Galway, you name it, where we've got a huge number of congested assets, and it's difficult for people to navigate and understand actually the utility arrangement, not to mention the quality of those asset records in itself. So there's an appetite for digital utility data and avoiding rework and making sure that people know exactly the utility arrangement on the site as best as they can. So we've taken a methodical approach. Number one, we need to know which utility asset owners work in certain areas. What we've done in the UK is developed a bit of an engine, and that engine will work out which utility asset owners operate in a specific area. And similar sort of concept applies in Ireland, noting that there's a lot less utility asset owners in Ireland than there are in the UK. So, for example, Ishkeran is the only water provider in Ireland, whereas we've got the best part of 10 different water companies in the UK, plus some independent water companies as well now. So it's a bit of a simpler task, but really still with the amount of asset owners in the telecom and energy space, as well as local authorities, it's still a bit of a challenge to obtain all the information. So what have we done? We've spoken to asset owners. We've done our research to understand which asset owners act in different spaces. We've spoken with those asset owners, established some relationships, understood their ways of working, whether they prefer certain maps to be sent to them to request their plans. And with a lot of asset owners, there is still a send and receive request process so that you obtain valid asset plans. And again, a lot of those would be PDFs. There is some benefit with Ireland, though. Some asset owners do provide digital information. And so whilst that is very helpful, they might be in different formats, different notation. We might have different schemas. We might have different file formats as well. So ultimately, it's a useful solution, but that still has a few problems. What we do within our utility solutions business is map that process and make sure we've documented any niche requirements or any niche utility specific arrangements. You might have different legends, you might have different operating areas. There's a lot of variance with different asset owners, and that's something we've found and mapped out with UK asset owners on a larger degree. We do a lot of testing as well. We make sure that our deliverables are suitable. We have a refresh service as well, which if you've got a long running project, we can update those plans to suit the duration of the project as well. And ultimately, this is a never ending cycle. There'll be new asset owners. We've got new types of asset owners popping up. One of the most recent developments is data centers and new assets belonging to those data centers and linking them to the energy network and also the fiber network has presented plenty of new asset owners that might not have knowledge of their responsibility to set up a service where people can request their plans. So we help those asset owners as well as soon as we're aware of them. I've just put a few asset owners on the right hand side of the screen. This list is not exhaustive, so there's plenty more, and you'll note that I don't think there's any local authorities to that. So they are really quite useful asset owners, especially where they own electricity assets, streetlights, that may present more of a hazard than owning street furniture or gullies. So what do? We've productized this to make it accessible to everybody. We're not in the position of making a really expensive professional service. What we want to do is make it low cost, and we deal in high volumes. So anybody can request this. You don't need to be, a multi-million-pound organization. Anybody can place an order, and we've even embraced a PayPal mechanism. So you don't have to be a limited company to work with us. And the idea is that this is accessible, it's cheap, and it's easy. We've set up something called a utility search report, which does a simple thing. It gives you a report of all asset owners affected on one particular site. And I'll show you an image in a couple of slides just to illustrate that in a bit more detail. But basically, a user will select a site. We will do the hard work of contacting all the utility companies and providing those plans, whether they're affected, or providing a confirmation to say they're not affected and don't have assets in a particular site, taking away the burden of admin from particular development. And you'll get that in a report. It will come as a PDF, but that is for a reason. And we back that up with digital file, which I'm about to talk about now. And this is the utility search map. In effect, this is all the affected assets shown on one plan. And we present this as in any different geospatial file format. And that can be a DWG, a shapefile, a geopackage. We can also show a KML, which I'll feature just shortly. That makes it accessible with many different GIS systems and also a PDF version for those that might not have that. I am going to present now a Google Earth fly-through. So I'm just going to switch my screen and hope this comes through. Kanthi, can you just give me an okay to tell me that you can see what I'm presenting on screen?
Yep, got it. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to show you this briefly. This is an example site in Bray, which is just to the south of Dublin. Very nice area if you're in the area to have a visit. And we have mapped all utility assets on this particular site. And if I just hover around, you can see some assets just become a bit more visible once I zoom in. And what you can do is click on one particular asset. So for example, I'm just going to click this. We have a streetlight that's owned by Wicklow County Council with some metadata included here. Any asset on this particular map, you'll see this one is an air grid electricity asset. You can see that voltage, rate, visibility and status are not specified on here. We do get a dearth of information from certain asset owners, but if I just go on to a Ishka Aran asset, you can see that some of these metadata attributes have been completed. So that means data is available for that. What we can also do, if I just fly through, I can see, you can see a larger amount or a more congested amount of utilities along the highway and footway. And that is expected for most urban areas. And you can see some assets like sewer assets running across public assets, public areas on the screen here. Primarily, footways and highways are predominantly where utility assets are buried, but that's not always the case. So our search will include public areas and where those assets cross private areas, as long as plans are provided. What we can also do, and this is a little niche, and I'll show you in Google Earth, is the Street View function. And I'm just going to select this area here just to get a visualization. We don't often get depth from utilities, and that's a key point. The reason for that is they don't provide it. Where some water companies will provide things like invert levels, that is provided on the base plans. But quite often it's not actually provided, so we don't digitize that. What you can see though, is we've got assets at 0 depth here, primarily for visualization purposes. The plans are only as good as the utility companies state, and further investigation is always required. And if I link back to the best practice specification that I referenced at the start, we follow PAS 128, and that has 4 quality levels: quality level D through to A. Now, quality level D is the simplest form, the easiest form, and the lowest cost. And that is purely based on utility records from asset owners, and that gives you a baseline understanding. What we're doing is not reinventing the wheel, we're just making it a bit more accessible. You can see assets shown on this plan, and you can actually follow them up, and you can see things like drain covers actually correlate quite nicely on this particular view. If I just scroll up, you can see actually a drain cover right underneath where the Street View car has actually gone. There's a few caveats here. Obviously, the plans are direct from the utility companies. There's a lot of straight lines in here, and that might just be a case of poor digitisation from the asset owners, but that is the only thing we go on. Quality level C, B and A will give more confidence in terms of the utility arrangement actually on site. Quality level C is a walkover survey, and users or practitioners would look at the plans, see if that correlates to assets on site, and they're looking for things at ground level like cabinets, chambers, streetlights themselves. And if I just zoom out here, you can see a streetlight there, but we don't have any assets belonging to a council. So that might mean there's an electricity asset along this street that is uncharted. Further investigation required. And that is where you might consider a full utility survey, and that'll be quality level B. Furthermore, if there's further complications or wanting to actually understand depths of particular assets, trial holes and hand digging can be a way to actually understand the actual depth of utilities and their presence to start with as well, especially if they're uncharted and don't show after further investigation. And that's the only way to fully understand utility assets on your site, but it's also the most expensive option. So there's a middle ground. So that's our utility search map, and that is available in loads of different formats. And that's the Street View element, which really help people actually navigate around particular construction sites, noting that quite a lot of construction sites don't look like the finished product. So it's really good from a visualization aspect to visualize that as best as possible, either with DXF files that you can use with on-site GPS equipment. Basically, it builds a picture from start to finish. I'll go back to my presentation now just to speak further. And I've just got a screen grab from the PDF there just to help further this. What I've also got is an illustration of all the asset plans. So we've got the different asset owners listed here as affected utilities. We've got the type of asset, and we've also got the date that that information was procured. Any notes as well. Sometimes asset owners may say additional plans to follow, for example. So we have those notes there. We also have some no response received asset owners here. So we know that some asset owners may well operate in the region. They might not operate on this site, and they might not have given us a firm not affected response. So we continue to chase those particular assets or asset owners to actually determine whether or not they do have assets. And that might well have been after this particular site was issued back in March this year. So we might have received a response later on in March, and we'll issue an updated version. That primarily is where some local authorities may not be able to come back to us in a swift timescale. We normally say between 10 and 15 working days is a moderate response time, but some asset owners do respond later than that, and we make sure we note that down. And just a couple of more screen grabs here. I've documented that in the presentation so that the fly through can actually be documented in the deck that I share with everybody. But you'll see what I talk about, the metadata incorporated within that, and the street view on a different part of the site that you can see actually correlates to some of the street furniture. You can see some drain covers here, some manholes, and you can see some of the road surface been relayed that shows a scarring of utility installation, and that goes back to the quality level C site survey. So that's kind of what we've built, and we deliver that across the UK and Ireland. We are working on some nationally significant infrastructure projects, specifically in Ireland. We're working on standardization, and that's something I'm keen to share across the board, and I promote within our business as well as at certain CPD webinars like this one. Keen to actually promote best practice where possible, and Atkins actually promoted the best practice specification that I talk about, PAS 128. We have a couple of opportunities to showcase this, and I'll be moving around Dublin and Cork over the next couple of months, speaking with different project teams and looking to expand on our coverage in Ireland. There's still some things that we learn. There's still some asset owners that we changed the way of our inquiries, and we work with more asset owners as they progress through digital maturity, and they might have different ways of communicating what assets they have. Things like web portals. I've mentioned sort of CAD outputs that are available through certain agreements with certain asset owners. It's a constantly developing space, and that goes back to one of the first slides I presented about constantly being in touch with utilities and making sure we're continuing doing our research and quality assurance. What we've done in the UK is talk about the so what. So we've got some baseline understanding of utility asset owners in particular areas. We know how that might impact a construction site, and we work a lot with the planning teams. So prior to actually any site activity, we're looking at feasibility of particular sites. We will provide our maps with developers and land agents, and it might be that we're tasked in terms of finding suitable sites for development and more impactful sites. I will showcase some of our outputs with members of this call as well, and I'll send some samples on the back of this along with our slide deck. But we've also released our exclusion zones. So each asset has a prescribed exclusion zone based on what type of work is planned, whether that is demolition, whether that is boreholes, whether that is low-rise residential applications. And it might mean that certain development sites are more accommodating than others, depending on that work. So we're now providing that as an output. What we've also done is understood way leaves that are in place. And this is a UK only thing at the moment, but can easily be transported over the Irish Sea, which is looking at easements and way leaves on particular assets. So on a similar point to the exclusion zone, we know what sort of buffer some of these assets have as part of the way leave. And that is normally a corridor where development is prohibited in some way, especially on private ground. In public spaces like footways and highways, there should be no way leaves. But certainly on private ground, there are, and we can document those and illustrate those to help planning. And just a couple of minutes further, I'll talk about our utility consultancy services as well. What does our baseline information actually mean for development of the project? We get involved in things like diversions, new connections, and actually costing, primarily when it comes to new build housing. What are the electricity considerations and costs to supply, let's say, 200 houses on a particular development site? We could do that. And we can also take a competitive tendering exercise to try and get the best cost and provide some expertise in terms of consulting with asset owners and independent asset owners in the UK in terms of what is the best solution. And we might challenge asset owners where developers might stick with what they're given and not challenge because they accept the first price. So there might be some negotiation that we can present as cost savings across project. So we have quite a lot of expertise in that. We're also working on a constraints map as well. So we can actually show digitally those utility constraints, where those constraints actually start and end. And that might provide a visualization across a site in a digital format. So it's much easier to comprehend. You're not bothering with 50 or 60 pages of asset plans, and everything is much more succinct, concise, and understood. And that's primarily our aim, to make things easier for users. And we've seen some success. So not only have we rolled this out in the UK for the last 20 years, we've rolled this out in Ireland since the start of this year, done some pilot projects, we've been appointed on some really significant schemes. We've also done some work in Ontario, in Canada, and we've had some initial conversations in other provinces as well about providing a similar thing. We've also seen BIDA, or Before You Dig Australia, come to fruition, and there are definitely opportunities to make sure that there's a digitisation element there. And similarly, we have a wet and dry utilities team in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And with the masses of development over there, we've been working with some of our teams to fully understand the process in KSA and seek to offer our skills and services on particular projects there. And so that's what we're doing with utilities. I will say thank you. I know there's a few questions in the chat, and I'll come to those if I may immediately. I know, Gary, you've put a couple of questions in the chat, and so too is Kate. So Kanthi, if it's okay, I can open the chat pane and give some answers, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do. Go ahead. So the first one is from Gary asking if you could share the slides with Hydrogen Island as a request. And the other one's a bit more, I'll give you some thinking time. It's from Kate. It's are there any synergies or lessons learned with NUAR and organisations such as LSBUD?
Okay. So yeah, easily I can answer Gary's question. So I will share the slide deck and I'll include some of the sample sites as well. That's easily done. Yes, I would be interested to speak further about Hydrogen Island, and no problem sharing that information. Might be worth a conversation. I wonder if any AtkinsRéalis colleagues have been working on Hydrogen Island. I'd be interested to have a conversation. And then Kate's question, are there any synergies, lessons learned with NUAR and organisations such as LSBUD? So yes, absolutely. So for understanding, and people may be watching this on demand as well, National Underground Asset Register is NUAR, and that is a England, Wales and Northern Ireland project to provide access to asset owners' records. That has been underway for the last 4 years or so, and that's been a project run by AtkinsRéalis, One Spatial and Ordnance Survey. Ordnance Survey are now running National Underground Asset Register, And in short, that is an on-screen illustration of utilities. And so AtkinsRéalis have been at the forefront of that and provided our expertise in terms of how best to do that. There are best part of 700 asset owners in the UK, and there's still a goal to make sure that all asset owners are onboarded to Newer. One of the differences with our current solution and Newer is that we search everybody, and that is in Ireland as well, where there is no central system. In a similar vein, Line Search Before You Dig is a really useful tool, and they have 150 asset owners in the UK that are members, and they provide a blue list top-up solution as well. Again, it's a useful tool, but it's not a comprehensive tool. So if you're looking at a comprehensive search of utilities on any particular site in the UK, you've got to go around the houses, and that's where our utility solutions services provide clarity and a comprehensive approach. In Ireland, sorry, there's a sort of second part in terms of lessons learned as well, Kanthi, if I may.
Okay, that's fine.
So ultimately, the utility industry, utility sector in both countries are really varied. You've got different levels of maturity, you've got different data streams, you've not got any harmonized model, but that has been a learning from Newer. So there is a national utility asset register harmonized data model where you basically present a level playing field for utility asset information, so that all the water companies basically provide their information and it is categorized in a suitable way, and that follows fairly uniform schemas, and that's mapped using fairly standardized or using standardized notation as well. So that helps visualization. We make sure we deliver according to that as well.
Thank you, Tim. I've got a question for you. In the international panel, we've been looking a lot at innovation, or the appetite for innovation, and lessons learned. So my question for you is around your perspective on innovation and how you're experiencing that, and specifically how are leading utilities actually adopting innovation, and what lessons have you learned in being able to stay ahead in all of the competitive world we're living in with energy transition?
I mean, I can answer that in multiple ways. Here's what's on top of my brain at the moment.
Okay,
we have to innovate. There is a changing dynamic of requests and requirements from particular clients. Where I immediately go to is the energy transition. We see a lot more demand for electricity. We see electric vehicle charging points now a common feature of most households, especially new households and new builds. Mm-hmm. We see existing infrastructure like solar farms come into fruition. We see wind farm cable routes onshore. We see wind farm sites offshore, ultimately promoting or increasing the energy capacity in every territory. So we have to embrace that and accommodate that. And there's a human right to have electricity in a household. So we have to make sure that that is available, and energy or electricity utility companies primarily have a duty to make sure that they can service each property. So we have to. The other thing I'd say in terms of staying competitive in a global energy transition, in the UK, we've got a bit of a mix, and we see nuclear power, we see wind power, big emphasis on gas power as well. And there's a huge LNG site that actually the Guild promoted as a site visit, probably the back end of last year. So we see a huge emphasis for a mix of energy, noting the challenges with renewables. Ultimately, if it's not sunny and it's not windy, what are we relying on? And I suspect previous Guild chair John Butterworth, if he's on the call, would state as we approach winter, what do you think the UK is depending on to satisfy its energy requirements? I suspect there's still a big emphasis on gas. So making sure that we have a varied rollout of utility assets across the spectrum, across gas, electricity, and renewable sources. How are different asset owners reacting? Like I gave a presentation actually yesterday as well on innovative techniques, things like pipe bots and quantum surveying. And there's a whole area in terms of innovation from utility asset owners. For example, I'll dwell on pipe bots, which are in effect robots being sent into assets to maintain and repair pipes predominantly without any human interaction. And that is from a safety point of view and an access point of view. And that is becoming more and more commonplace. And you might have seen things like Spot the Dog that can go in and survey sewer assets without the need for humans to actually put themselves in harm's way or maybe higher risk situations. So there are things like that that can take the risk out of utility construction work. Ultimately, innovation is such a varied and broad subject that there are many different ways to innovate. Use of better technology, and I could go on. There's probably a CPD session on innovation in the utility industry as a whole. It's probably a good subject going forward.
What are you finding is the appetite for it with the customers that you're talking to, Tim?
Well, I mean, people love digital information that is accessible. And that's a key point. So it's all well and good giving people, point cloud information and really heavily condensed geospatial outputs. But until they can actually use it, it's meaningless. So the appetite for quite simple digital innovation and something as simple as putting all affected utility assets on one page is phenomenal because people can interact with it. And one of the really useful things is the place your marker on an iPhone tool, where you can actually see your location amongst all these buried utilities and actually position yourself and almost get rid of the risk of reading a map wrong. So those small incremental differences are what's going to drive development. And those things really apply to our customers. They really emphasize marginal gains and make sure that we take it step by step rather than complete overhaul. It's those little 2%ers that really help.
Thank you, Tim. Michelle's asked me about what's planned for the rest of this year. I've also put a question in the chat. So if you've checked the question in the chat, and I'll just answer Michelle. So the international panel is running another session on November the 20th, which is looking at global innovation and the appetite for innovation in digital technology in the gas industry in the UK. But we're also looking at other countries in Europe and getting representatives from other energy organizations to talk about the appetite in those countries. That's in November. And then we're going to be looking at some new innovations in the context of pipeline leakage and also in adapting to regulation as we go forward into 2026. So there'll be more coming through on the pipeline website. But in the meantime, in terms of cost and investment, how can the tools that you've just been describing justify capital investment for asset upgrades while lowering long-term operating costs?
I'll answer that quite simply. There's a return on investment piece where £1 invested in buried utility understanding relates to 30 times the return on investment in terms of value. So that is avoidance of strikes, that is avoidance of rework, that is comprehension and knowledge of what exists on a particular site prior to any work going on. That does require time and the foresight of project managers or contractors, whoever's leading initial investigations. So yeah, 30 times return on investment is a no-brainer. And what I've spoken about cost of this service, we make sure that this is accessible to everybody. So we're talking hundreds of pounds, not thousands, for any particular site. And we have a cost model based on area. Basically, the larger the site you search, the more expensive it is. And we start from something like £195 or like 230 euros, something like that. So it's not an expensive option. Some project stationary budgets are more. So you know, we've designed this to be as impactful as possible, and affordable by anybody, let alone construction companies. If one person is looking to develop you know, parkland or something simple, agricultural areas, we make sure it's affordable and accessible to them.
Excellent, thank you. This is from a customer perspective. Is there a customer angle to this in terms of does digitization of assets play a role in improving reliability and service quality for customers, perhaps?
In terms of customers of what? Customers of ours?
Customers of utilities. You're talking about digitization for utilities. So
Yeah.
does it, you know, talking about the public and the end user, you know, is there a customer story in digitization?
Oh, absolutely. And there's probably two angles on this. Number one is existing asset owners that make their assets say more accurate, but there's a caveat on that. To increase the accuracy of their assets, absolutely, there's something better. You're looking at improving the amount of leakages. You're improving the amount of assets that actually are mapped to a better degree and therefore can be responded to maybe quicker from a customer point of view. The other side of things is asset owners that do not have digital assets, and there are a few. In fact, there are tens, if not hundreds, of assets who could benefit from enhanced digitization of their assets. So where you've got maybe as-built drawings and asset records from years and years ago, and we see tender opportunities for asset owners that are looking to digitize some archived plans. So we know there's a real requirement for literally initial digitization of those assets. So yeah, having something digitally means they're accessible. You don't have to traipse through pages and pages of PDFs. And that is always a positive. Accessibility remains one of the key blockers on any site investigation. Making sure that the access to the right plans is available is a fundamental thing. So yes is the answer, Kanthi.
Okay, fine. So speed, reliability, and common sense, I hear, are the sort of three things that that come out of that answer for me. Is there any questions from anyone else in the group? Well, it looks like we've come to the end.
I'm good, thanks.
Oh, Gary, brilliant.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I think I've got everything that I need now. Thank you.
Right.
And I'll reach out to the guys at Hydrogen Island and see if there's any interest, and you can either present it to one of our meetings or have a face-to-face when you're in Ireland next, perhaps.
Fantastic.
It looks like we've come to the end of our session then, Tim.
Well, that's been great, and yeah, I am available for further questions, and if anybody wants to reach out by email, more than happy to field some questions, and I'll share my my slides with you, Kanthi, and you can send around for everybody's benefit.
Thank you very much. And if anybody is interested in the Pipeline Industries Guild or finding out more about the international panel, please do contact us. You can find our details on the website. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kanthi. Thanks, everybody.